Hello and welcome back. My name is Rosie.
And my name is Paul.
And this
is Sinister.
So, today we have the absolutely gobsmacking case of Sherri Papini. I was going to do a completely different episode today, but then I came across this documentary. It's on Disney Plus.
Can I just say something here first?
Go on.
Tonight's podcast is coming from a van parked in a laneway. So if you just hear any kind of spooky sounds in the background, we're safe.
Yeah, we thought it'd be fun to be out in the element for a spooky podcast.
Yeah.
To be fair, this is probably one of the least spooky podcasts.
Oh, damn.
I know. That's perfect for me because I'd rather not do a spooky podcast in a van.
It's coming close to Halloween. We're going to have to do a spooky podcast.
We will do a spooky podcast for Halloween.
Cool.
So, back to it, I had a different case. I came across this documentary on Disney Plus. I was focusing more on this than the other one, so I had to do it. Oh, yeah. This week's episode just had to be on Sherri Papini.
Sherri Papini. Let me start my notes.
Jokey. Can you see?
I can't see. It's very dark in this alleyway.
It's not
driveway.
an alleyway.
Power Street.
So, let's start at the very beginning with Sherri Papini. So, Sherri was born on the 11th of June 1982. She married a man named Keith Papini in October 2009, and the pair ended up having 2 children together, a son and a daughter. Sherri has been described as a super mum who did the best by her children and made their childhood amazing. It was said that Sherri and her sister Sheila had grown up in more of a traumatic environment, with their parents seeming to have alcohol and drug dependency issues. This ended up with a more physical and emotionally abusive household for the sisters to grow up in. Friends of Sherri's described times of seeing Sherri being emotionally abused by her mother, pulling her hair. It seemed that given Sherri didn't have that loving home growing up, but had seen her friends in loving homes, she wanted to make sure she provided one for her own family, and that's what made her become this super mum mother who wanted her children to have the absolute best childhood.
As any mother would want.
Yeah, as any good mother would want. They had a lovely home in Redding, California, and she threw amazing parties and gave her children fun experiences. There's a lot of videos of her just being a very fun, active mother. And when she was made redundant at her job, she chose to be a stay-at-home mum. But on the 2nd of November 2016, tragedy struck this poor young family. The day started as normal. The kids were actually at daycare this day, and Keith was at work. So Sherri sent Keith a message at 10:47 to ask if he'd come home for lunch that day. Due to it being busy at work, Keith didn't respond until the afternoon when he let her know it was a long day, but Sherri never replied. Keith returned to their home around 5 p.m, expecting his family there, but it was still an empty house. He wasn't worried yet. He's thinking Sherri's taking the kids on a walk or something. So he sends her another message asking where everyone is, but again, this text wasn't responded to. Keith ended up calling the daycare to ask what time Sherri picked up the children, to which they informed him the kids are still there as Sherri never picked them up. So obviously he's panicking a bit at this time. Sherri's a loving mother, she wouldn't leave her children there, so...
It was out of character for her.
It was very out of character. She's not going to, leave them there, go off and do something else. So Keith checks the Find My iPhone app to track Sherri's phone and sees it's along her running route near the family's home less than a mile away. Keith goes there and finds Sherri's headphones wrapped loosely around her phone with strands of her hair intertwined. The song Everything by Michael Bublé was playing on repeat. This just so happened to be Sherri and Keith's wedding song. It's now 5:51 p.m, and after seeing that, Keith calls emergency services to report Sherri missing under suspicious circumstances. Throughout this call, which can be found very easily online, he states being completely freaked out by these events and starts saying that someone must have grabbed her. He said, "I'm telling you, something happened to her." Now, he did sound kind of calm on the phone, but you could tell he was concerned or nervous about something. They asked about the children, and obviously, at the time, he was more concerned about his missing wife, but he said he would get his mother to pick them up. The kids are at daycare, they're with staff, they're being looked after. She's the one at immediate threat.
But you don't daycare, don't they normally close?
Early?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to keep your kids there for the whole evening.
I was thinking that. I think in Australia, most daycares close by like 3 or something.
It's the same everywhere.
Yeah, I was very, like, the fact that no one's been contacted or anything by the daycare. I found that a bit odd, but
Yes, especially because the kids being a routine. They'll be contacted at similar times every
every
day.
day. Yeah. After this call, Keith calls Sheila, who was Sherri's sister, and informs her. Sheila was pregnant at this time, but had fallen to the ground sobbing, worried about her sister. This is a crazy amount of stress for a pregnant person to go through, obviously. But it was during this call that police arrived on scene and Keith left to deal with them and show them around what he'd come across. He shows them where he found her phone. He had taken pictures before ever picking it up. Some officers canvassed the area while others stayed talking to Keith. He ran them through his day since returning from work. They obviously ask if she's ever done anything like this before, to which Keith declines. He was adamant she would never leave their family by choice. And then obviously the usual questions pursue. Officers end up finding 2 witnesses last seeing her running while wearing a pink running jacket on Sunrise Drive, which is where her phone was found. One said they saw her around 11 a.m. and the other around 2 p.m. I'm not sure if she was doing like a really long run or if she did 2 separate runs.
That's a marathon.
It's a lot.
A big marathon.
To be on the same street 2 separate times, I was thinking more like maybe it was 2 different runs in the day, keeping busy. I don't know. She was very like small, fit woman.
She was a fitness fanatic.
Yeah. Or it could be that like the witnesses' times were off. You know, they could have both seen her at 12 and were just off with their times.
Yeah.
Something like that. You never know. Sheila, pregnant and worried about her sister, went for a drive with Keith's sister Suzanne, and the pair drove around the neighbourhood, screaming out Sherri's name, obviously hoping for her to appear out of the woods or something. You know, desperate times, you do whatever you can to try and find someone, I suppose. I don't know what I'd do in that kind of a situation.
Yeah, we say her phone was, head pieces were found, strands of hair.
I know, it doesn't sound great, does it?
No.
No. News reports started early with images of Sherri and the details. Now, Sherri's this blonde hair, blue-eyed, beautiful woman. She's only small, about 45 kilos or 100 pounds, and everyone's sharing that she's a supermum. So this is everywhere in the news and super well broadcasted, which Keith really wanted and was encouraging, hoping to find his missing wife. Investigating teams end up finding cash in a purse of Sherri's at their home and kind of stop thinking that she's left by choice, as she'd likely want to take all cash with her if she was disappearing and not using credit cards.
Like, was it a big sum of cash?
I think it was about $100.
A petty cash.
It is, but if you're disappearing, you'd want everything on you, wouldn't you? Like, you'd want every cent just because you can last longer without needing to use a card.
$100 not going to last you long.
It's 2016. Maybe it lasted a little longer. This was pre-COVID.
No, there's not much value in the dollar, no, to be honest, because you have the tip everywhere on top of it.
Okay. Regardless, that was their train of thought. She would take all cash she had if she was leaving. Her wedding ring was also found at the house, but they assumed she'd just removed it to go for a run. So, yeah. They speculated due to her appearance, she would fit the kidnapping description or description of someone who would be taken and sex trafficked. This wasn't in the news, but speculated by police.
So if you're small and fit, you're in high demand for kidnapped. When they take their passports and they take all their identity and just...
Okay. I don't know, I don't have a lot to do with sex trafficking people.
That's what they normally do. That's why they bring them into countries. They bring them in false pretenses and take all their identity off.
Well, regardless, this speculation was that she suited the type.
That's a weird speculation.
I do agree, but I do understand where they're coming from. So, they worked all through the night, but the real search proceeded the following morning with massive search parties that ended up garnering a lot of attention, with 200 volunteers at one point looking for her. Police officers and dogs combed the area. They had California Highway Patrol assist with an aerial search. Detectives did checks on 290 registered sex offenders in the area, and they began searching other states too, as they could have gotten out of the area. You know, you're going to drive someone out of the state. A $10,000 reward was introduced for any information leading to Sherri being found. I believe this was an anonymous donor. It was either a government thing and then an anonymous donor added to this later, or this was the anonymous donor. But towards the end, the reward was upped until it finally reached $50,000. Some was from family, some was from this donor.
And how come she was so popular?
I have no idea. I think it was just so big in the news. It really hit the news hard. Keith was on radio stations every day trying to get as much attention, hoping to find his wife.
But was he well known, Keith?
No, neither of them, I guess, were. It was just really upped in the media. Now, this area of Reading was a known area for abductions, and they seem to have become more common in the previous years, with women going missing and never found again. The area was also linked to drug cartel activity and sex trafficking. I don't know how they established that, but okay. If you know someone's a sex trafficking victim and they're still classed as missing, if they're missing, how do you know they're sex trafficking victim or linked to the drug cartel?
Yeah, you can't. It's kind of weird speculation.
Yeah, I know. But neighbours were painting a very different view of Sherri and Keith's relationship, and Keith was beginning to get in the firing line. Some were now telling police of times they'd heard screaming and cussing at each other. Some said they just got a weird feeling around Keith. Not that he'd done anything wrong, just that he gave them a creepy feeling.
So, first, is always going to be the husband.
Yeah. Another neighbour mentioned that only a week prior, she had heard Keith yelling at Sherri that he was going to kill her, and her first thought was that Keith had done something to Sherri. She said she doesn't know if he did or didn't, but he puts on a really good show, but he's an asshole.
And what was Keith? What was his occupation?
He worked at Best Buys, which I guess he just worked in retail.
No, he went in the cartels or drugs or trafficking or
just typical suburban white guy.
Boring job.
Yeah, but Keith was investigated. He said in his police interviews that he thinks it's ridiculous to be a suspect, but he understands because sometimes it ends up being the husband. He said Sherri watches those types of shows and he's seen it before. From day one, Keith gave police full access to his and Sherri's phones, laptops, everything they wanted. He was compliant, and he never got a lawyer, which doesn't prove or disprove innocence, but I think he was just very open to them getting everything that could help them find Sherri. He was not wanting a lawyer to interrupt the search process in any capacity.
He was let down that he had nothing to hide, basically.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, T.
Bum bum bum. So, investigators contacted Sherri's best friend Jennifer, who said that Sherri stated recently that Keith had threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave him. Sherri went as far as to say she thought he'd chop her into little pieces and bury her in the backyard. But Jennifer stated she'd never seen that side of Keith and that Sherri can be a little dramatic and exaggerative.
And who's the father of Sherri's child? Sherri, the sister's pregnant?
No, Sherri is the girl we're talking about.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Who's the father of her child?
How do you know she has a child?
You said she was pregnant.
Sheila's pregnant. Sheila's sister.
Sheila's a sister. And who's the father of Sheila's child?
I actually don't know his name. He's not in anything.
Okay. No, I just wondering.
I like how you work. But, no, sorry. I can't find any documentation on him.
Or do we know him?
Is he going to come in later? Who knows? Another of Sherri's friends, Nicole, said Sherri had told her of a fight between her and Keith ended up hitting her. Sherri was bruised over one side of her face and said it was from Keith. Keith was interviewed about this by police, and he said they were playing Fruit Ninja on the Wii. Do you remember the Wii?
Yes.
Yeah. And when he was playing around with the remote, he hit her in the eye by accident.
But there was a lot of accidents that time with the Wii. That was a stupid thing.
I agree. The amount of injuries, I fully agree.
Didn't think you'd be old enough to remember the Wii.
Stop it. There's not that many years. Keith said she ended up with a black eye from the Wii injury, and when people would ask about it, he would joke that she didn't put the dishes away and make light of it, not thinking much of it. This event had happened at a family friend's place, who corroborated Keith's story, saying his elbow had hit her in the face by accident. She said they were all laughing about how terrible it looked. Police are confused. There's all these people saying that Keith's abusive, but the abuse isn't adding up and there's no actual evidence. There's evidence against him not being abusive, you know?
Yeah, I think there's some people saying that he meant it, and more people are saying
that he didn't.
And they witnessed it.
They witnessed it and it wasn't that. And you don't know, maybe these people were closer friends with Keith and that's why they were corroborating his side of the story. We don't know. Keith was asked about the arguments. He stated he didn't want to talk badly about Sherri. Obviously, she's missing and the mother of his children.
Of course.
But they were kind of forcing him to. He ended up saying she's physical with him and made indications of scratching, hitting, etc. with his hands. He said when she gets to a certain level of mad, she gets loud, but recently things have been fine with the both of them. He said early on in their marriage, he'd come across messages in Sherri's phone telling a friend she'd met a cute guy, which obviously really hurt him. He didn't want to get divorced, but was upset and made the decision to get a post-nuptial agreement. Sherri agreed to sign it because she didn't want to hurt Keith. He said this was before they had kids. Keith stated from then on the two legally had to keep their money separate. He said she was let go of her job in December 2015, which was nearly 12 months earlier. Since then, Sherri had decided to be a stay-at-home mum from the severance package she received, and with that paid the electricity and the daycare, since Keith refused to pay for daycare with Sherri being home every day.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Well, she wanted to be a stay-at-home mum and still put them in daycare, and that's fine. Well, I think it's fine. Everyone needs a break. She can't be 24/7 super mum.
Which is what a stay-at-home mum is.
I know, but I think there still can be, a day or two a week where they're...
I should like there is, of course. You give her to pass the kids off to her sister or whatever.
Okay.
But paying for daycare is going to be costly.
Yeah.
I imagine you can't just pay for a day or two when you want to go shopping or something. You have to pay
For
your full term,
Yeah. Well, Sherri then got a boob job, which I think bothered Keith a little, as he said it was a stupid investment. He just stated that she wasn't very good with money and he knows her severance package will eventually run out. So he's willing to provide for his kids and her, but he just wants her to be providing for certain things, and given that he's not a wealthy man. I don't think he's well off by any means, so it makes money a bit stressful. Keith confirms with police if Sherri decided to leave, she would get nothing given the post-nuptial agreement, and that she doesn't even own the car, let alone the house or anything else, so Keith would end up with everything. So this isn't making a lot of sense to police. They're being dragged in circles with different stories. Police went through her journals to work out more, but it was just as confusing. Her journals stated she was in a more of an old-fashioned relationship where she was the homemaker and Keith was the provider. But then her friends said they never thought Sherri would allow that in a relationship and that she would imply being controlled by Keith, while Keith was saying that was what she wanted, to not work. So she's telling her kids he's making her stay at home, be a homemaker, and that's not what Keith even wanted. It's very confusing.
Yes.
I know.
Where did the money from the boob job come from?
From her severance package. From being made redundant at her work. But this is the thing, you get a big package, it goes. It doesn't last forever.
Yeah. A boob job is not going to be cheap.
No, I can imagine so. Which, it's her money. It's just, there are certain decisions when you're with someone, you have kids with someone, you have to make together.
It is, but you're not going to just live off your severance package, and plus, you put your kid into daycare.
Yeah.
And go and get a boob job, and I think that she'd pay off her car or something.
Buy something so she has something.
Yeah.
I guess she probably always thought she could rely on Keith too.
Market.
I don't know if it's a supermarket. I don't even know what Best Buys is, actually.
Sounds like a fucking pawn shop supermarket.
I have a feeling it's like an electronics store or something, but I'm actually not sure. I should have looked into this.
It's probably a cheap electronics store. It's not your big brand names.
It's not got Mac in it.
No.
Alright. Now, even going through her diaries, they couldn't get a grasp on who Sherri was as a person. People whose job it is to analyse diaries and things like that to work out a person could not understand her. They couldn't get a grasp on what the stories her friends told, Keith told. None of it added up. Her diary entries seem to indicate her enjoying the homemaker role, as Keith was saying, while her friends are still sharing this different story. But the search continues and everyone's involved. There's people putting in free labour. A sign-making company made free signs for the search. Everyone just wanted her to return home safely. It's a massive thing, all over the news, nationwide. The FBI ended up being called to help with the case. They described the case as being one of the most scrutinised cases with a massive media frenzy. There was even forums on web sleuths, which I've discussed in previous cases, but I don't know if you remember, there was a Bryce Louisa case and we discussed web sleuths, which is like an online forum where you can discuss different cases. No.
With the public?
Yeah. No, you don't remember it?
No. What call it?
It's called web sleuth.
Web sleuth.
And people basically have their own theories and everything. So people are seeming to do their own investigations and posting about them on this, and everything's blowing up massive theories and speculations.
And there's detectives actually checking this out?
Well, it's not that they're checking it out for answers, but it's more like this is becoming really sensationalized in the media, and it's probably negatively affecting them doing their job because everyone's just like, it's Keith, it's this person, it's that person. And then being really public, oh, this doesn't even make sense.
I think I should be on that.
I think you should too. Which, it was big because of the big media scene, and then all the online stuff really blew it up too. But Keith wanted this because he just wanted it to find his missing wife, obviously.
I should go first.
However, at this time, Keith still hadn't been cleared by police, so he was still being scrutinised. Everyone saying he did it online. It was very publicly on Twitter and everything. It was like, it's always the husband, and he would do interviews and he would be crying. And
was he not at work or anything when all this during her sightings?
I don't think so.
Best Buy was closed. That's the.
Well, he was at work when she went missing. No, he was at work. He was genuinely at work.
And he's witnesses of being at work.
Yeah, but people are speculating, is he working with other people? Did he get someone else to take her? It's so excessive.
I thought he was the first one to find her phone and headphones.
He was, but that's because he had Find My iPhone, I suppose. There's reasons behind these things. But in this on this TV interview, he was crying, speaking, obviously hoping Sherri hears him, saying, "I'm coming, honey, I'm trying, I'm doing everything I can, and I love you." But people online were saying it was a red flag that he was crying in his interviews, and they seemed off. Everyone's trying to blame Keith, which is crazy. Imagine someone being like, it's a red flag that he's crying over his missing wife.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's show if you do or show if you don't.
Yeah, if he wasn't crying, it would be an issue. Now, his sister Suzanne said in a news interview that the pair have an amazing relationship and nothing would happen between them that could lead to what's happening now with Sherri missing. And over the course of a few days, over 900 tips were sent into the police that they had to sort through during this time. There ended up being crazy reports, reports of hearing mountain lions and finding satanic shrines with blonde dolls resembling Sherri, clearly trying to link it to a satanic cult. Or there was a suspicious guy in camo in the area, and a woman named Sue has a sinkhole in her property and you can't see the bottom.
They're all going for the 50 grand reward, I'd imagine.
I can imagine that would be the thing, but things were so hectic, and police are going in and investigating this sinkhole in this woman's backyard and all sorts. You can't see the bottom. It's just madness.
It is, but something like that. So when you put out rewards, you're going to get every kind of weirdo and crackhead and anything that's.
It really does kind of open you up to have spam callers. Now, Keith was asked to do a polygraph test 5 days into the disappearance. During the test, he declined any involvement, ever intentionally hurting anyone in his life, and he passed the test. Keith was officially cleared and no longer seen as a person of interest in the case, as no evidence could link him in any way. Plus, he was at work the entire day.
As I was asking previously, but yes.
Yes.
But we'll take note of that.
Then this means they have to go off different leads, and they went off previous missing persons incidences in the area, which, as I'd said, there'd been a few. Sherri's family came forward and said of a time she ran away, but that she was only 16 at the time and had moved to LA while couch hopping. But we have discussed her childhood, and that could be an indication of why she wanted to run away. I feel like being an adult with children and a life you enjoy is different. And Sherri's parents were adamant that she hadn't left by choice this time. They actually mentioned an old boyfriend of Sherri's who may have been involved in taking her. The family talked about previous boyfriends regularly not being great, but so happy when she met Keith because he was so good to her and very grounded. Sherri was sure they were soulmates, telling her friends that they were going to be together forever and that he was the person she'd marry someday. By the way, he kept this from the kids. Like, when she first went missing, he wasn't telling the kids about this. Like, he didn't want the kids knowing. They were only young, didn't want to traumatize them with mummy's missing. So I don't know if he just said mummy's gone away for a little while or what he said, but he was not like, mummy's disappeared. And
But they must be all young kids when they're in daycare.
they are young kids.
They weren't even school age. Like.
But they would definitely notice their mum missing.
Yeah, but just say them. Like, when I tell him, he don't know herself, or himself.
I know he doesn't, but still, he wasn't telling them that they were missing and they can't find her. He was just whatever it was he said.
But like, how are we supposed to say that to young kids?
Well, exactly, but he didn't do it.
We're not supposed to do it.
Just letting you know.
I think they have to find a body in there first and then start breaking the news.
So FBI came to the conclusion, based on findings in her phone, that it's likely she could have walked out and explained this to Keith. Sherri had been discussing meeting up with an old fling in the days leading up to this. A man named Donovan, who was in her phone under a woman's name, had met Sherri 5 years prior. They had a lovely night together. She told him she was married but unhappy and that her husband keeps her locked inside while abusing her.
Well, she was just being a bit dramatic, so.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it, that she's telling everyone she's being really badly abused. There's no indication of it. Who knows if she is? Keith's being cleared, but, polygraphs aren't 100% anyway.
Yeah, but you're going to be fairly good to pass it, though.
I've never had to try. Donovan said that they were texting about a potential future for about 3 months following, but then communication ended, and every year or so following, they would text and check in with each other, see if the other was single yet, and this was all throughout Sherri's marriage. This was the man Keith had found out about, and the man, he'd seen the messages that caused the post-nuptial agreement. Also, how would someone who is abused and everything by their husband be so comfortable sending messages? If you're being locked inside but you can text some random man?
Yeah, but if Keith had to find out about this Donovan, why don't you just call it a day? What you want?
Keith. Well, he knew about it at the time. He didn't want to divorce her. He decided on the post-nuptial agreement. He obviously didn't think she was going to continue messaging him for 5 years.
But you want to see one message, you say, just good luck, girl.
Yeah, I get you, but he obviously didn't feel that way. They were married, he loved her, whatever. I know what you're saying. People are different.
Yeah, stupid, but fine.
Okay. Can't blame people for this.
Stupid, like.
Okay. So, the messaging had been going on for 6 to 7 months at the time of Sherri's disappearance. Donovan had sent her messages that he would be in her area for a meetup, and Sherri agreed, planning it for the day she went missing. But there was some type of miscommunication in their texts I don't fully understand, and Donovan seemed to think she was declining a meetup, which she definitely wasn't in the text, and he booked an early flight home. When she asked about this and said, are you available for the meetup, he said, I thought you weren't available, I booked early, but if you want to meet me halfway, we can. She obviously declined, because how are you supposed to tell your husband and children that you're disappearing for a night or whatever? Donovan didn't end up seeing Sherri again. But in the messages, there seemed to be an implication from Sherri that she was working on a solution for them to finally be together. That this is what Keith was informed about and why they think, FBI thought, Sherri might have walked out. They said to Keith if she was trying to leave and suddenly she's plastered all over the news, she's going to go into hiding, and he agreed that that was possible, that she could now be in hiding due to him advertising this all over the news.
With Donovan.
Yeah. Now, this went on for 22 days. On the 24th of November, 2016, it was Thanksgiving morning and the 22nd day into the search, when Sherri was dropped off at a highway around 150 miles from Reading at 4:30 a.m. She was spotted by another driver who contacted emergency services.
So she's alive?
She's alive. You can hear Sherri in the background saying she needs an ambulance as he's on this call. He initially said she was kicked out. He goes, she said she was kicked out of her boyfriend's car, and she starts screaming, no. She's there going, no, no, and then she mumbles something in the background, and then the caller says, her name is Sherri Papini, and you hear her screaming again, and he goes, Papini.
Okay.
It was just like so silly. So dispatcher asks her what's wrong, and he asks Sherri then if she's hurt, and she says, "I am chained." So he relays that. Sherri was then found by emergency services, bruised and bound by restraints. She had bindings and injuries, as well as burn marks, and she had been branded with Exodus on the back of her shoulder in giant letters. She was now about 39 kilos or 87 pounds, like she had been starved, and her hair was cut all choppy. So her long blonde hair was now shoulder length, and she was obviously taken to the hospital. So the bruising and marks on her body indicated that she was in pain at several different times over the weeks, so the torture was repetitive throughout. When police arrived in hospital, she just kept asking for her husband, saying she doesn't know anyone and hasn't seen anyone she knows yet. She told police angrily that no one could protect her and no one found her, so she wants her husband. Her entire family was traumatized by this event. She looks battered and frail, there's tears, and she has Exodus branded on her back in giant letters. It's like scabbing still. It's horrific.
That's burned into your skin.
That's burnt in forever.
Coal marking.
Yeah, it's
cattle marking. Not called your coal. That's how they used to mark cattle.
Yeah, it's
branded cattle.
She's branded. Like, it's such a horrific thing to do to a human, right?
And Exodus, what says that some kind of cult or something, or some?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Some gang or some?
Nothing that they could link it to. Her entire body was covered in bruises, and Keith said initially he didn't trust what she was saying, but looking at her like that, all of his doubt disappeared. Clearly, whatever he'd heard about her texts and things, he was ignoring after seeing her the way she was. Sherri refused to talk while the investigators were around, saying she doesn't trust them. Sherri stated that her kidnappers had read her articles where these investigators thought she'd left voluntarily and she didn't, so she doesn't trust them. She ended up telling Keith there was a dark-coloured SUV, 2 women, an older one and a younger one. They were Hispanic. They were both speaking Spanish. She said she was held at gunpoint and provided a description of the alleged abductors to an FBI sketch artist. But she'd only talk to Keith and he had to relay information and things. It's just like a very awkward situation.
I suppose if she was out again tortured for 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Over 3 weeks. And the police weren't doing natty about it, so she didn't trust them.
Yeah. I get that. Like, if you weren't
It's not
found...
like she was fucked up in the head.
Yeah, I get that. And you would. Like, there's so many things you would think after this going on and no one finding you. You somehow escape. Like, I don't know how she ended up on the street. Like, but she found them. They didn't find her. You know?
Yeah,
You'd be a bit traumatized.
She had no faith in
anyone, really. And probably
in
now.
the justice system of them.
Yeah. The sheriff released a statement that they were looking for a dark SUV with 2 Hispanic women who had a handgun in it. He released that Sherri was treated with non-life-threatening injuries and already released from hospital. He didn't elaborate on the injuries or confirm if she was sexually assaulted, but we will later find out that Sherri had been found with 1 male and 1 female's DNA on her clothing and things like that. The male DNA did not match Keith's. Going forward, Sherri would only do police interviews with Keith in the room. She refused to speak without him there and wasn't very helpful during this time. She's traumatized, but she will not help. So it's almost as if she doesn't want them to be found, she's just really not trying. Interviews with her were a bit awkward to watch, but police found no reason to doubt any of Sherri's story, and a long investigation continued. Keith began to feel bad, questioning what if he had come home that day for lunch. He seemed to be blaming himself a bit, like if he had returned to the house, she might not have been abducted. He just seems to feel really guilty around this time. Sherri said she was listening to their wedding song while running, as it's a good pacekeeper and puts her in a good mood, and that's why it was on repeat when they found her phone. But this was continuous interviews of her not being able to give a lot to the police in any way, really, saying she was struggling with memory and everything like that. Eventually, they were able to get out that Sherri was running by the mailboxes and a vehicle stopped, backed up, and stopped again beside her. She cut diagonally across, and she didn't even notice the car door opened, but they said hey or something to get her attention and were looking for directions. And that was when she saw the small revolver. Sherri immediately crouched down. She said there was an older one and a younger one. Both had Spanish accents. They said they didn't want to hurt her. She put her phone on the ground and ended up pulling out her own hair, upset that she couldn't call her husband for help. The back door opened and somehow she was put inside by these women, but she struggled remembering exactly what happened. They put a pillowcase on her head and she was on the floor of the car on her side, and they took her away. She could remember the smell of laundry detergent on the pillowcase while she felt nauseous. She said she heard mariachi music, likely from a radio. So media were almost immediately at their house. Keith said when Sherri first went missing, all he wanted was media attention, but it was different now that she was back and there was cameras staring at the house. She needed to recover from the trauma, and they obviously wanted their kids kept away from all of this craziness. Sherri wanted to keep a low profile during this time, and they weren't in public often, and when they were all covered up in disguises. It was on the 29th of November 2016 that Keith released a written statement to Good Morning America, which is a morning news show, stating that Sherri had been branded, was covered in bruises and repeated beatings, and that she had been starved down to 87 pounds. He said her signature long blonde hair had been chopped off, and she was thrown from a vehicle with a chain around her waist attached to her wrists and a bag over her head. Now, there started to be some rumours of her staging the kidnapping to hide the affair and things like that.
That's some staging.
I know. The story was odd and didn't make a lot of sense to many, like her just disappearing while running, pulling out her own hair. There was just some cracks in the story that people couldn't work out. And also, the spot that she had disappeared from, there were 5 houses in sight, so people thought it would be way too gutsy for people to pull up and attempt to wrestle a woman in a car in broad daylight.
Yeah, especially in the middle of the day.
Yeah. However, we have seen things like this done before, though there was no sign of a struggle, no scuff marks on like the gravel or anything like that to indicate like she'd put up a fight trying to keep away from people like these women. So Sherri seemed to be implying that she was kidnapped for sex trafficking, but hostage experts weren't so sure, since sex traffickers want their victims to remain attractive. They wouldn't likely cut off her hair, starve her, and burn her, so they were trying to think of other possible motives for the abduction. The Papinis ended up moving to an undisclosed location for their privacy, healing, and safety. Due to the trauma, Sherri attended 2 2-hour therapy sessions a week, which Keith would go with her. She would not go anywhere without Keith. Not the police, not anywhere. The woman, she just wasn't talking to anyone on her own, but in these sessions, the therapist thought it would be good for her to write about her experiences while it's still in her mind to help with the investigation and closure for herself. Sherri ended up writing a book called 22 Days, which was a detailed recount of the 22 days of her capture, how the older one found more joy in hurting her and the smaller one didn't seem to enjoy it, etc. She went into all of this detail. They continued to search for these people, but leads seemed to be running dry on who these women were. In April 2017, call records revealed that in 2003, Sherri had been self-harming and blamed her mother for the injuries, attempting to have her mother thrown in jail. These reports weren't confirmed by the family, but for several years following, and nearby communities were looking for 2 Hispanic women, and many tips were given in about suspicious-looking Hispanic women, which just seems a little bit racist.
So if there's 2 Spanish women chatting, oh,
yeah, it must be them. And I just think that's really sad. There was interviews later of women being like, in our community, 2 women wouldn't want to be seen together. There was just so much fear put in their lives. Really kind of sucked. Sherri put fear into her own children about strangers kidnapping you, so making sure you can always run into the house when you're outside, etc.
She's probably fucked up after that, and she was left back with her kids.
Yeah.
Family.
Yeah. And she's drilling this fear into them as to protect them, but really she's traumatizing her children. They ended up putting cameras outside and they had to sleep with all lights in the house. She was having nightmares and screaming throughout the night. Family said she'd start screaming or crying through therapy appointments. It was just a regular thing for her to completely break down in front of anyone. And look, trauma is a crazy thing. Is that something you should be allowing around your child or your children?
Like you said, that's 2-hour sessions, and not doing much a week for it.
Clearly not. This is going on forever. So apparently, Sherri stopped being able to handle anything to do with the Hispanic culture, which I think is just so insane. She refused to eat black beans because that's all her captors would feed her out of a can, and she would freak out about Hispanic people in public thinking they were her captors, which is just...
Yeah, look, it's probably true in a way, but that's kind of...
It seems quite excessive, no?
You can't blame all the Spanish people, but...
Well, that's exactly it. It's
I
almost...
didn't get, I suppose, if she's all for 22 days and just listen to Spanish accents, people talking, it's going to kind of turn you off Spanish people.
Look, I don't know. I think there is some things taken a bit too far. And, like, to just completely refuse anything to do with Hispanic culture and things, just... I don't know. Look, I've never been held captive, but I just can't imagine...
They wouldn't hold you, no?
I beg your pardon?
They wouldn't keep you.
Why? I'm adorable. I just think that's... I don't know. Look, my opinion on that is that it just seems like an unnecessary need to be racist.
Well, she's not being racist, but like, she's going to be fucked up in the head. It's like fucking into a peddler's cell or something. She should be put into after that. Like,
yeah, yeah, she should have been, really.
So she was left out of the hospital soon after being
the same day.
She's like, that's not right.
Not right at all.
Like, there's a bit of recovery and being taken away for torture for 3 weeks. Like, you might be thinking, I don't know.
You would be. Sherri couldn't handle loud noises or closed doors. She wouldn't even go to the bathroom without Keith.
He knows how he gets shit sick as Sherri now at this stage.
Well, that's it too. She also said she was being drugged in her food while in captivity, so she had to watch while others were preparing her food and only let Keith or her sister make it. Also, if you're that hectic over it, why are you not doing it yourself?
Yeah, so she's probably... How long is she back now?
This went on for 5 years.
Just look, she's fucking playing the...
Yeah, it's a bit hectic. But I just feel like she put a lot of emotional labour onto her family, including the children, who were young children, based on these traumas from being captured. Seemed to be a bit upset about a lot of the emotions the kids would see and began encouraging her to do the screaming and crying parts away from the children instead of doing it in their faces, where it was just upsetting them and traumatizing them. But for 5 years, she needed Keith to stay by her side at every given moment, and if he wasn't with her, the kids had to be. She also received $30,000 in victims' compensation over the following years. Now, shortly after Sherri had arrived at the house, we're kind of going back a bit, shortly after she had returned from being kidnapped, she had a gathering with a load of their closest friends, 10 to 15. And during this, she...
Okay, welcome home party. Hey, I'm back.
Almost, yeah. But she wanted to know everyone's reactions to finding out she was alive. So she had everyone go around and share their stories. Which is just... She just seemed to be needing a lot of attention and reassurance during this time. In a very, I'd say, unhealthy way.
Yeah, a period of time that you don't want to see no one.
That, and also, why do you need to know people's reactions to finding out you're alive? It just seems odd.
Yeah.
They're wanting to celebrate with you. Obviously, they're happy you're alive. So beyond that, what do you need to know? But she wanted the nitty-gritty ins and outs, the details. Keith stated he had a weak moment with Sherri's therapist and actually said he doesn't think he believes Sherri's story, to which the therapist said her story has never changed, which obviously indicates it being the truth, and then mentioned all of her marks and permanent scars and asked Keith if he thought she was capable of doing that herself. Keith actually said he thought she was capable. He said that she's been manipulative throughout their relationship, and it didn't seem super far-fetched for him.
I suppose, but the branding is a bit farther.
The branding is a bit crazy, isn't it? But she had, we'll get into like bruising everywhere, broken nose. Every part of her was black and blue. There was not a part of her. It was just different levels of, on every inch of her skin, basically, different levels of how old the bruise was. So there was something everywhere, all over her face.
Yeah, and they're even all the bruises.
It'd been from day one.
From the start of the abduction
until 3 weeks later. So it's these ongoing, every single day something was happening. However, he also knew of her having this history of self-harm. But Keith knew her having gone through this trauma and her husband not believing her would be extremely traumatizing. So he worked on just believing her. Even if in his head the stories didn't always make sense, This is my wife and I have to be there for her. Then, DNA evidence found on Sherri's clothes was retested in 2020 and led them to an ex-boyfriend, which helped finally crack this case.
Oh, are we back to Donovan?
No.
Oh.
Police went to ex-boyfriend James Rhea's home to talk to him, where they realised his home matched the general layout of the place Sherri had drawn to show where she was held captive. There was the same pipes in places, like super similar structures, like things that wouldn't really make sense for them to be the exact same. They were telling him it seemed like he'd organised 2 women to kidnap her and bring her there, so they obviously wanted to find out more. After pushing, because James really didn't want to share any information, he ended up telling them the truth. It was clear he loved Sherri and would do anything for her, but he was not going to get arrested on kidnapping charges for something he did not do. So he had been talking to Sherri since the previous year on her burner phone that Keith obviously didn't know about. She had told him that Keith was abusive and had friends in law enforcement, so she couldn't do anything about it. Her only chance would be to leave secretly. James thought he was helping out a friend in need because Sherri had said that Keith had recently broken her jaw. He confessed to going and picking up Sherri to take to his home in Costa Mesa, which is 8 or 9 hours away from Reading. She stayed in hiding in her room. He'd screwed boards over the windows when she asked him to, and everything that she wanted because she was so scared of being found by her husband. He said he never hit her or punched her, but when she would ask him to do things, he would. He'd hit hockey pucks off her legs and things like that to inflict bruising. He held out a hockey stick that Sherri ran into from one end of the house, like directly into that, to break her nose. But he said he'd be gone each day for 8 to 10 hours, and during this time, she would hurt herself mostly. He said she used cleaning products to give herself rashes and would only eat about a banana a day to lose this weight, to look as if she'd been starved. He said he bought her a wood-burning tool and helped her burn herself. We later find out that Sherri watched the news while her family cried and searched for her for 22 days, like including her pregnant sister, who was going through all this stress, and her children. Like, obviously, her children didn't know, but her children. James didn't seem to have any malicious intentions, just willing to do whatever Sherri asked of him to leave this situation. He kind of just said she obviously had a reason she needed these things done in order to leave, and I was just going to let that happen. I think he had hopes of them being together one day. So after 3 weeks, Sherri said she was ready to leave, and James was upset that she was leaving him, but agreed to drive her back to wherever she wanted. He was hoping that they would end up together, but he understood her needing to get back to her kids. On the way back home, Sherri chained herself up with his chains and different ties and things, made him get rid of his mobile, smash it up, and then randomly on the side of the road asked him to pull over. She jumped out of his car without so much as a goodbye and just left running. James passed a polygraph test on this.
That is what happened.
Yeah. Sherri denied this story completely, and she was let off by police. Keith initially kicked her out of the house, but decided nothing was proven and eventually brought her back. They continued living as a family. Sherri continued bringing up 22 days throughout their relationship and how she couldn't do things because of it. And Keith ended up snapping one day and asked if they could go one day without talking about the kidnapping. And Sherri responded, "I have to live with the fact that you never found me."
No, she's blaming Keith.
Yep. So Keith continued having shame and issues surrounding this. It's a really messed up thing.
It's a blame game now.
How horrible. You didn't find me. It's his fault.
I bet he's sorry. No, this one did.
Investigators had to look into her, where they found a secret Pinterest that Sherri had photos of different branding equipment on. So they were digging through her social media and just found this secret Pinterest that wasn't linked to anything else. They dug into videos from their previous interviews, because all police interviews were recorded, and So they were trying to find information, obviously. And they ended up finding call logs connecting her and James while she was denying contact with him since she'd been with Keith. But on the 3rd of March 2022, Sherri Papini was arrested on charges of making false statements to federal law enforcement officers and engaging in mail fraud. She had not only misled investigators and wasted law enforcement resources, but she had profited $30,000 in victims' compensation from an event that never occurred.
Well, that's the biggest crime you could do in America, is take money off them.
The FBI followed her to a music school where Sherri took her kids and told her someone had bumped into her car outside to get her away from the kids and not cause a scene. But her kids followed her out anyway and saw as they arrested her. She actually threw her phone at her oldest son, who was still a child, and said to call your dad. It was weird. But anyway, Keith ended up getting a call from the piano teacher telling him to get the kids because Sherri was taken by the FBI. Like, it's just so much trauma for the kids. I think it's really messed up. Trauma for Keith too, but like, you choose your partners. You don't choose your parents.
Yeah, that's he had his chance at the start of the relationship.
Yeah.
Telltale signs were there.
They were. I still feel bad for him, don't get me wrong, but yeah, he ignored a lot of signs. Keith separated from Sherri following this, and what was it? He was clearly just not having anything to do with this going further and not wanting the kids to have anything to do with this either. Obviously. After 6 weeks, she signed the plea deal admitting to orchestrating the hoax. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay $309,902, including restitution, to cover the cost of the police investigation. Her attorney blamed her history of poor mental health.
That's not bad, because the investigations went for 5 years or more, weren't it?
She doesn't even have a job.
Well, yeah. I suppose her pay off or whatever she got. Definitely gone at this stage.
Yeah. A few days later, Keith filed for divorce and sole custody of their children. And I just think about the effect this had on the kids the entire time. Her friends, family, her sister, like, the whole thing is absolutely fucking insane to me. The racist tones, like people trying to blame every Hispanic woman they see, and in this area, 25% of the population was Hispanic at this time. Like, and also she's talking about like mariachi music, and I just can imagine people taking action.
Did James not be brought up for anything, or?
No, I guess he wasn't. Which I don't think he should be. He's there thinking he's helping a friend get out of a bad situation.
She was surely self-harming while she was with him for the 22 days.
Yeah, but that's not. But like, why is it his fault that he's there going, I'm willing to do anything I can to help a friend?
Do a fucking nuthouse.
Look, I don't know. It's a tricky situation. They didn't blame him though.
She must be fucked up if she can brand herself. And
how messed up do you have to be to organise branding yourself? Like, there is ways to stage a kidnapping without doing that too.
But how do you even brand your own back?
I had him do that.
Because you spell it backwards. It'd be Sododoku or something.
Stoku.
Instead of Exodus, like it'd be spelled wrong if you've done your own back.
Oh yeah, look. Regardless of anything, who would want to brand themselves? That's there forever. She will have Exodus on her back for the rest of her life.
Just for 3 weeks of nookie with James.
They never had sex.
His sperm was found in her.
No.
Clothes.
No, on her clothes, and it wasn't his sperm, it was just his DNA. They never had sex during this time. He was there helping her out, hoping that one day they could be together. The sketches that were done on the 2 Hispanic women that supposedly kidnapped her, super racist looking, like some like 80s. Oh, like, just seemed very racially motivated, very 80s, like bandana around the mouth, big hoops, tiny eyebrows, or like one had tiny, teeny plucked eyebrows and the other had really thick, bushy eyebrows. It all just seemed really racially motivated. Far-fetched. Sherri had also been found around the time of the investigation with a blog that was very racially motivated with hatred towards Hispanic women. super disgusting. I didn't really read through it. I looked things, but I think she chose to say they were Hispanic to ignite hate. I genuinely believe that.
Yes, does. Yeah, she sounds like a fucked up in the head. But I don't think you can blame her mother for pulling her hair and cursing at her to make her turn out like that.
Absolutely not. But just to note, Sherri denies that this blog ever belonged to her. It's her maiden name. It says it's Sherri Grafe. She denies it. She said that she thinks someone was putting it up to bully her.
You can't believe a word out of Sherri's mouth.
You cannot believe anything out of Sherri's mouth. Like, I have not yet heard a truth out of her mouth.
Yes, a fair imagination.
Yeah. And as I said before, I found a lot of this from a documentary on this case, and a lot of Sherri's friends are interviewed in it and no longer believe that Keith ever laid a hand on Sherri. Some said he was a bit jealous and didn't like her going out without him, but he would never touch her.
Fair patience to stick with her for the 5 or 6 years after she'd been found.
I know, I agree. And after hearing all these stories that she'd been saying to the friends and stuff, like, he's getting interviewed, he's hearing about different people and he's continued to stick around. I think that's insane. Not insane, but sad. Like, he must just be there going, we have a family together. Just seemed like a damaged person that wanted attention from the wrong, like, things.
Yeah. No, look, it takes all types, but weird one.
Oh, well, that is the story of Sherri Papini.
Yeah, a weird story.
Were you expecting any of that?
No, definitely not.
Well, yeah, no. What are you expecting, the husband and...
You're expecting the husband or an ex or something like that, but...
It's weird, isn't it?
It is, like, stress. You know, so what goes on, people say, it's like, what thrill would you go with that, like?
And do you know what the
like,
issue...
It's not payment, it's not sexual, that's just fucked up in between the years, like.
Everyone said they still don't understand why. Even investigators, everything, they were like, we still don't have a why. We don't know why she did this.
Does that drink or drugs or...
No.
Then,
supposedly no.
Like, there's no gain over it for her.
Like, no. But was it, there is the speculation, was it to hide the affairs? But if anything, it only brought light to the affairs. And was it to gain control in her relationship with Keith? Was she there thinking her money's running out? She needs him to baby her and she doesn't want to go back to work, so if she's been kidnapped, how could she possibly be expected to go back to work with all the trauma she's going through? Keith will have to provide.
She's a bit of over 300 grand owner, she's going to have to do something. and probably pay back the 30 grand that she got first.
Yeah, but that is the story. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.